episode 5 of Bucket Questions. Where we left off, we had been excitedly talking about the diversity of arthropods, and within the arthropods, talking about the amazing diversity of insects, including not only beetles, flies, but grasshoppers and dragonflies and butterflies and moths and cockroaches and Dobson flies. And if you've never seen a Dobson fly, you are missing out. They're like this big, and the males have these giant horns on their heads, and they're really fabulous. Tons of other kinds of insects, stink bugs, and all sorts of things. So much diversity in the insect kingdom. And then within that, there's a huge amount of diversity of just the flies. And we were on our way towards talking about the maggot fruit flies. So let's skip there. Now, here we are, same picture. This is an apple maggot fruit fly. And there's, for pretty much every North American fruit, there is a fruit fly to go with it. Now, there's actually two kinds of fruit flies. There's the little kind of fruit fly, where's my picture? This guy, this fruit fly, which is the one that you usually think of when you think about fruit fly, because these are the ones that appear when you leave a banana too long. And actually, it's the bugs that are responsible. A long time ago, there used to be an idea called spontaneous generation, which is the idea that life could arrive from non-life, like a fly could randomly emerge from a piece of meat, or a fruit fly could randomly emerge from a banana. Well, now we do know that actually bananas are life, first of all, but that the fly eggs are just too small to be seen without a microscope, and that's why it seemed like they were appearing out of nowhere. But life has to come from life. That's the third part of the cell theory. All cells come from pre-existing cells. Anyway, this little fruit fly, that's a different kind of fly than the maggot fruit fly. And it's usually only in agriculture that people even know about the maggot fruit flies. And so for every North American fruit, there is a maggot fly that goes with it. And before I get into maggot fly biology, I just want to take a moment to appreciate these wing patterns here. And let me show you another picture. There, right there. What scientists think is that this wing pattern evolved because if you kind of look at it in a fuzzy kind of way and ignore the fly's little head there, if you look at this part, it actually kind of looks like the profile of a jumping spider. And so scientists think that this wing pattern evolved to scare away predators, because visual predators would think that it was a jumping spider and not a nice juicy fly, and they wouldn't go near it because they'd think that they were going to be eaten instead of eating the bug. Okay, so back to maggot flies. So what all of these kinds of fruit flies do is that the adult female fly will land on a piece of unripe fruit and lay an egg or 2 or 3 into it. And it's seriously into it, like you can't see it. The egg is on the inside of the fruit. And this is actually an interesting evolutionary tale as well, in addition to the wing pattern, is that this fruit is actually a hawthorn. And hawthorns are native to North America, and there was a hawthorn fruit maggot fly, that would do the same thing. It would lay its eggs inside the unripe hawthorn fruit, and then what happens is the eggs hatch inside the fruit, and the little larva, the maggot, kind of wiggles around the inside of the fruit, eating the fruit from the inside out. And when apples were introduced to North America, because apples are actually an introduced species, some of the hawthorn maggot fruit flies would land on the apple trees instead, because the baby apples look really similar to the baby fruit fly, the baby hawthorn fruits. And so eventually they got to be 2 different species, because the hawthorn maggots flies would lay on the hawthorn, and then the apple maggot flies would lay their eggs on the apple maggots. And so over time, they just got specialized for hawthorns or apples, and now they're 2 different species just within the past few hundred years since Johnny Appleseed introduced apples to the majority of the northeast of North America. Okay, so that finally brings us to blueberries. So blueberries, being a native North American fruit, have their own maggot fruit fly. And this is a picture of some Maine wild blueberry fields. Blueberries have been naturally growing in Maine for as long as we are aware of. They're low bush blueberries, so the actual plant is like only 6 or 8 inches high. When you harvest them, you have to use these scoops called blueberry rakes, and it's really not good for your back. I think I raked blueberries for about 10 minutes and decided I was done. But this is how Maine wild blueberries are harvested. And out in Washington County, there's these huge expanses of blueberry fields called the Blueberry Barrens. And a lot of the Blueberry Barrens is owned by the Wyman Corporation, and you've probably seen their name on frozen berries in the freezer cases in your grocery stores. And there's lots of other independent blueberry growers out there too. And this is pretty much where I did my master's research. And so over hundreds of years, both Native Americans and European settlers have turned naturally wildly growing blueberries into big expanses of field that is one of the big crops in Maine. Now, I need to talk a little bit about agriculture for a moment. Whenever there's a crop growing, there's going to be numerous pests that go along with that crop. And it really doesn't matter what kind of crop it is, there's always pests. And the pests can be insect pests, the pests can be fungal pests, the pests can be birds, the pests could be rodents, mice, rats, those kinds of things. There's always something else besides humans trying to eat the crop. And so no matter what kind of farming happens, whether it's big commercial fields or small organic farms, there's always some sort of pest control needed. No matter what you are growing, farmers always need to get rid of pests. And usually when we talk about pest control, what we're actually talking about is killing those pests. So I can't think of any agricultural situation in which some member of the animal kingdom doesn't have to die in order to get us our food. And that's just kind of something that we have to accept as humans and the way that we live. But part of the work that we were doing at the University of Maine in the early 2000s was farmers were really looking for an alternative to spraying their crops with pesticides. There were numerous issues with pesticides, including that the bees were declining, and people were blaming pesticides, that people were realizing that pesticides were really terrible for human health, and there was a big push for more organic farming, and also the Atlantic salmon was starting to be on the protected list in a major way, and a lot of these blueberry fields were adjacent to streams that were habitat for the Atlantic salmon on its way to its spawning ground. And so they were not going to be allowed to do the pesticide sprays, because then those sprays on the field, when it rains, those chemicals can travel into the water and disrupt the habitat of the threatened Atlantic salmon. And so farmers were really looking for a lot of ways to control pests other than spraying pesticides. And that's where the University of Maine came in and the graduate work that I was doing. So we were working with a method of pest control called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM. And IPM involves a lot of different ways to try to manage or control pests, and a lot of ways to either get pests out of your field or kill pests other than just using pesticides. I made this chart with a program called MindMup that is part of the Google suite. So if you click on the little 9 circle grid here when you're in Google and you scroll down far enough, you may find MindMup, but if not, you can click on more from G Suite Marketplace and get MindMup. It's a really cool way to make a chart, and I'd like to use it with my biology classes after vacation. So see if you can get it and play around with it. So integrated pest management involves lots of ways of trying to control pests. Monitoring constantly for pest outbreaks so that hopefully you can deal with them before they become too big. Trapping insects through various means, putting up physical barriers to prevent pests from getting into your crop, hand-picking pests off of your crop, planting cover crops, using controlled burning. Blueberry uses this a lot. Crop rotation, blueberry uses this too. Investigating pathogens such as bacteria and fungi that can infect your pests, and biological biological control using native predators or introduced predators to control your pests, and then only pesticides when necessary. And these are just some of the aspects of integrated pest management in general across the world. So at Orono, we were doing blueberry integrative pest management, and this is one of the papers that I wrote here. See, that's me, that's my maiden name. And these are my two advisors. My advisor, Randy, he was working with the sticky traps in the blueberry fields and to see if they could trap the blueberry maggot flies before they landed on the blueberries. And that was what he was working on when I finished my graduate program. And if you want to know more about blueberry IPM, UMaine Cooperative Extension has a ton of resources, and so you can just go to the UMaine Extension webpage there at extension.umaine.edu, scroll through it, and there you go. Okay, so I was looking at spiders. Could they prevent pest outbreaks in blueberry fields if we enhance the natural spider habitat? And my advisor was looking at specific ways to control blueberry maggot fly. This is a blueberry maggot fly, and this is an unripe blueberry, and just like with the apple maggot or the hawthorn maggot, the blueberry maggot fly will lay an egg inside the unripe blueberry, and the egg will hatch, and the maggot will develop inside the blueberry, and this is a picture of a blueberry maggot for scale. And so the short version is, do the spiders eat them? And if you really want to, you can read my paper. But it's super technical, and I actually don't recommend it, because the short version of do the spiders eat blueberry maggots or blueberry maggot flies is no. There's just a complete difference in lifestyle. Most of the spiders in the blueberry fields are wolf spiders, and wolf spiders are hunting spiders. They don't build a web. They crawl around on the ground, and they leap on their prey, and they eat them that way. And they don't really tend to crawl up onto the blueberry plants. Despite the blueberry plants only being like 6 inches high, the spiders don't really climb up there. Every time I swept my net through blueberry plants, I never ever caught a wolf spider. So not only will they not be on top of the blueberry plants to catch the flies when the flies land, they have no way of getting into the blueberry plants to get at the maggot, and then they won't be on top of the blueberry plant when the maggot emerges from the blueberry to fly off as an adult to find a mate. But the way that it works is that if there's a maggot inside the blueberry, it eats the blueberry from the inside out. So if you've ever had a kind of a mushy blueberry in your batch of Maine wild blueberries, it is possible that there's a blueberry maggot in there. But don't freak out. Have you eaten blueberry maggots if you've eaten Maine wild blueberries? I mean, yeah, probably. But remember that there's really not a major difference between eating bugs and eating seafood. It's just a little bit of extra protein. You won't even notice it. You're fine. Trust me. And that is the story of the blueberry maggot. Hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. See you next time.